most out of it. So the other thing that's so special about this is that you're really all social entrepreneurs. You're doing well by doing good, as Benjamin Franklin said. And that is a very old American idea. But the absolute best definition of entrepreneurship came from a poet and a playwright in a play. And he said, some people see things as they are and ask why. Some people dream things as they are not and could be and ask why not. That's the best definition of an entrepreneur. That's what all of you are doing, because you're all dreaming of changing the world for the better. And that definition of an entrepreneur is actually a fantastic definition of the person you're going to hear a little bit later, who is my boss, Secretary of State John Kerry, who does look at the world as it is and says, no, it can be better, we can change it, which is entrepreneurialism too. He's going to be introduced by a young woman from the Congo, and first you're going to see a short film
to a different region of the world. We've come together to foster economic development, to promote health, especially for women and children, and to advance the work that brings you here today. The entrepreneurship that creates jobs and opportunity. We do all this because we believe that whether you live in Kuala Lumpur or Kuwait or Kansas City, when you're free to have your own ideas, pursue your...
Ultimately, through my primary passion has always been to empowering other women to break long-standing expectations about a woman's role in society, to pierce the highest and hardest glass ceiling, and to become entrepreneurs and community leaders themselves. Because of all of us here know from experience that how countries succeed, women can continue to be treated as second-class citizens. That when women earn a steady paycheck, we are more likely to invest what we have in things that strengthen family, neighborhoods, and in education, nutrition, healthcare, and shelter. So I pour all my energy and resources into that cause, launching a women magazine and organize events to allow women in businesses to meet each other and encourage one another to keep going.
Patricia, thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. You all energized? I saw that video. I thought I'd quit as secretary and become an entrepreneur immediately. I was all charged up by it. But Patricia, thank you for a very warm introduction. My memories of our tour together and our conversation in Kinshasa are still very fresh in my mind, and I am really delighted to see that you have continued your twin goals of, number one, building a successful enterprise in your home country, but also empowering young women to start their own. And I think she's a great example. I'm delighted she's also part of President Obama's Young African Leaders Initiative, which is a critical initiative the President has exemplified, I think, extraordinary leadership on. My thanks to Rick Stengel, the State Department's point person for public diplomacy, and to Charlie Rifkin. He's one of our top voices in the State Department in Economic and Business Affairs for their vision in helping to organize this GES, and to Ambassador David Thorne for his role in helping us to take this message out on a global basis. I want to thank California for reminding me how absolutely astonishingly beautiful it is out here. Enough to make me cancel my flight. I'm not going home, folks. I want to particularly thank our hosts here at Stanford, a learning institution that so embodies this area's tradition of innovation that President John Hennessy is known as the godfather of Silicon Valley. And I know that he has played an extraordinary role in helping this valley to become the remarkable center of thinking and of groundbreaking new initiatives that it is. It is really fitting that we are all gathered here for this, the final gathering of the GES under President Obama, but it will continue, and as you all know, will take place next year in India. I also know that this peninsula is famous for its 20-something CEOs who wear jeans and hoodies to the office and make a living trying to upend the established order. So clearly it is only fitting that your opening act should be a guy with gray hair and a dark suit who spent decades in government and whose idea of disruptive art probably pretty much begins and ends with Mick Jagger. But in fact, my years of experience have actually taught me a very important lesson about these types of gatherings. The best thing the government can do is convene the forum, make sure the coffee is hot, and get out of the way. And we've seen in the past 6 years that a successful GES is measured not by the numbers of speeches that are given, but it's measured by the contacts that all of you make. It's measured by the quality of your interventions, by the quality of the relationships you build, the networks you take away from here, the partnerships that you forge with peers and hopefully with potential investors, and the networking that you do that may lead to the next iconic global brand.
So I'll start with two things. The first is a thank you to President Obama, Secretary Kerry, State Department folks, White House, all the folks who put an event like this together. It's a huge amount of work. Let's give them a hand. The second thing is a quote from Muhammad Yunus, who is one of my heroes, is all humans are born entrepreneurs. And I opened my first book, to start with you with this, because this is important when we think about this. Entrepreneurship has always been important to human endeavor. We are born that way. Whether it's the first creation of technology or the move to modern times. We have the industrial age. For the industrial age, we create the industry, manufacturing. Information age, we create media, technology. Network age, we create networks. But now, it's actually even more important than ever before. And the reason is because the world's accelerating. It's accelerating in technological development, it's accelerating in network creation, it's accelerating in the technology by which we make ourselves more productive. But that also creates disruption and change. And part of that disruption and change creates pressures upon the middle class, pressures upon the changes in jobs. There's some studies that suggest that 40% of current jobs over the next 2 decades may in fact actually disappear as they are. How are new jobs created? They're created by entrepreneurs. Right? If you actually look at all of the economic studies in terms of where job growth comes, it becomes from new industries, new high-impact entrepreneurs, new high-impact companies that create the new industries, that create the work and create the prosperity. And that's why it's so important for us to convene here today. Part of the thing
that you may get 100 no's a day for 5 years straight before you start getting those yeses. But if you believe, if you're passionate and you stick with it and you are empathetic to reality and you listen, you will eventually find that success. And that's been my experience as an entrepreneur through good times and tough times. So
I think that's good advice, not just for entrepreneurs, but for life. That's what leadership is all about. Success is hard. Success is really hard. So keep at it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Speaking invitations, why are you here?
Well, I think that one of the most important things I can do is help the next generation entrepreneurs, and this is what this room really is. You have, I think, 1,000 entrepreneurs from around the world, and I spoke at the GES last year. I'm a page member, so I spoke in Nairobi, And I ultimately believe that one of the best ways to make a huge impact on the world is to inspire people to actually change that world. And so who are the people that are changing that world? Well, I think entrepreneurs are some of those people. And I also believe, and I said this when I was in Nairobi last year, is a lot of us are from Silicon Valley and we operate companies here in San Francisco or the Bay Area. But if a customer is using a product, I don't think they care where the founder's from. I think they care that that product is amazing. And so what does that mean? I think what that means is that the next generation of entrepreneurs can come from anywhere. They're not necessarily going to come from San Francisco because ideas don't just originate here. They come from truly anywhere. And so I told them that I thought when I was in Nairobi that the next great entrepreneurs could come certainly from Africa, and they certainly could come from really any country around the world. And so this is so core to my mission, not just to help entrepreneurs, but to help entrepreneurs all over the world, because that's where ideas are from. And most of our business, 75% of our business, is outside the United States.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, it'd be great to see. That's awesome. Maybe a show of hands from the audience. How many of you are not from here?
Basically, everyone.
That's so awesome. So great.
There you go.
Okay, so Airbnb is about 8 years old.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about, some of these folks may be in the early years of their journey.
Right.
Was it always easy? Did you always think it was going to be the huge success that it is today?
It was really not easy for many years. When we first came up with the concept, I told somebody I really admired about it, and he looks at me, he pauses, he gives me this look, he said, Brian? And I said, yes. And he said, I hope that's not the only idea you're working on.
I also have the cereal idea.
Yes, exactly. And so this idea literally did not work for a long time. In fact, we launched and 3 people used it. So we worked, we started rebuilding the website, we launched again, and then 2 people used it. And I was actually one of those 2 people. So that wasn't really good. So then we launched a 3rd time, and we had 80 people use it. For the Democratic National Convention in 2008, we had 1 weekend of business. The following weekend, we had nobody using it again. And I realized if only there were political conferences, political conventions every week, we'd have a business. Within a year and a half of doing Airbnb, I remember totally running out of money. I used to have a binder that kids used to put baseball cards in, and Joe and I used to put credit cards in them. And we just literally were funding company with credit cards. We ended up meeting investors. We met 10 or so angel investors. We were trying to sell 10% of the company for about $150,000.
Oh my gosh, that kills me.
And
I wish I had a time machine. I would write you a check right now.
Couldn't even get a meeting. And so eventually, we just continue to fund the company ourselves. We literally made collectible breakfast cereal to fund the company. We called ourselves serial entrepreneurs. And we literally went door by door meeting our customers, and that's how it started taking off.
What? Because there are a lot of people in this room who I'm sure have questions about whether they should keep going. How do I know my idea is good enough to keep going? There's faith, which is sometimes well-placed faith, and sometimes misplaced faith. How did you know to keep going?
Well, the thing is that whether you have a good idea or a bad idea, I can almost guarantee it's not going to work for a really long period of time, and it's always going to look like a bad idea. And in fact, a lot of times the great ideas seem like really bad ideas. I mean, when we told people about Airbnb, they were like, are you crazy? You think strangers are going to sleep in other strangers' homes? That's never going to happen. And I remember somebody telling me, he said, don't worry about people stealing your idea, because if it's any good, everyone will dismiss it. And I think that's probably true. How did we know, and how did we keep going? I think one thing we did is we tried to solve our own problem. I mean, the way the company started was I and my roommate could not afford to pay rent. A design conference was coming to San Francisco. All the halls were sold out. We had this idea. Let's just turn our house into a bed and breakfast for the design conference. I didn't have any beds. My roommate had 3 air beds. We pulled them out. We called it the Air Bed and Breakfast. We ended up making enough money to pay rent. Many years later, people asked, why did you keep going? And I said, because I remembered back to that very first weekend. And I remembered how amazing those experiences were. I got to pay rent, but more importantly, we made friends. And I said, if people knew and could experience what I experienced that first weekend, this would be an idea that would spread around the world. And so I think it's not about blind faith, but it's about if you've solved your own problem or seen people be deeply connected to your product. I mean, the best piece of advice I ever got was from our first investor, Paul Graham. He said, it's better to have 100 people love you than 1 million people that sort of like you. And so if you can find 100 people that love your product And if they're, as long as there's more people like them in the world, then you will have an idea
Yeah.
that it'll spread around the world. But if you can't get a few people to absolutely love your product, then you do have a problem.
So that's, I mean, knowing when you started out that you did not have a lot of traction, I'm an investor, right? I meet with seed stage investors all the time. What questions should I have asked you, if I hadn't had the fortune of meeting you back then,
Right.
what questions should I have asked you, or what should I have seen? What should investors have seen in you and your team and the idea that most of them didn't get for the first 3 years?
Well, the problem with funding a lot of entrepreneurs is you're kind of looking for pattern recognition. Oh, this reminds me of Facebook or Snapchat or like some company. And the issue is that like Facebook probably didn't look anything like any other company, right? We didn't look like any other company. I went to art school. A lot of people didn't want to invest in us because I wasn't an engineer. We were looking for traction. Our graphs weren't going up and to the right. I think you should look for two things. You should look for a great entrepreneur. And to know somebody's a great entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean they've started a company before, because a lot of us, it was our first time. But you look at their background and say, what have you created in your past? Maybe it wasn't a company, but like, do you have this like creative resilience? And I think people didn't look past my immediate background. The second thing is, are people deeply passionate about what you're doing? Like, do customers love your product? I think it's more important to measure love than growth. If people absolutely love your product, they're going to tell other people and your product's going to grow. If an investor is waiting to see a graph up and to the right, they're probably already bidding with a whole bunch of other investors at a really high price. And, you know, so I think it's actually maybe late by then.